Hello and welcome to Get the Freaking Basics Right. If you're joining us live, our speakers are in the Slido chat discussion answering your questions right now. For audio-visual issues, click the technical support button below. I'd like to now turn it over to Daniel Croix and Robert Lamprecht for the presentation.
Hi and good afternoon. I hope you all can hear me all right. We're pre-recording this from Austria and it's now about late at night, so good night also from us. My colleague Robert and I will now give you a little bit of our insights that we've gathered over the last couple of years within the field of security within EMA, within Europe and border regions of Europe. And we want to get one message across to you, which is we think we still should work on the fundamentals, we still should work on the basics. But before we dive right into our talk, I want to give you a quick explanation to the obvious elephant in the room, because most people of you that know KPMG usually as an auditor. And this should not be an advertisement, but this is an actual team photo from an office party somewhere around 4 years ago when KPMG in Austria, where Robert and I are based, actually remodeled their cybersecurity advisory team, and a bunch of crazy tech folks got let loose on this very innocent audit sheep people. And it has been one hell of a ride ever since. And actually, one wouldn't have thought that working for an audit company in an advisory capacity in the field of cybersecurity could actually go that well. But enough about our employer. This is Robert and myself. My name is Daniel Croix. I used to work for a startup somewhere in Vienna, just doing web development stuff. And then after graduating from university, I started working in a security team for a bank, leading a small team there as well. And about 4 years ago, I joined KPMG, a security advisory team. In my day job, usually I'm in charge of all kinds of different projects, from security architecture, security strategy, and in the past, I've been doing technical security assessment, red teaming, OT security engagement, those kind of things. And by design, we got called into quite a lot of incidents. And this is what our experience what we will speak of today in this talk and give you a little bit of insight of what we have seen and what we think is the next steps that should be taken for CISOs, for security-minded people in the company. But before we dive into it, Robert, please introduce yourself.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Robert. I'm now 16 years now with KPMG in the role of a director and running the security folks in there. Before I was working with IBM in their global services role. Primarily, I'm focusing on some security strategy parts and incident response type of work. So whenever there is a hack attack or some things like this, running into the enterprise and checking how to get out the attackers. And of course, also wearing some more or less assurance hat or audit type of hat. I'm also doing quite a lot of attestation work, checking IT data centers and service providers globally, doing some SOC 1 or SOC type 2 kind of reporting thing.
And of course, for Austria, he's a mountaineer. But the two mountains we will get later on in our presentation. First, usually when we would be on site with you, unfortunately, we cannot be on site with you in Singapore, which we would really love to be. But I would want you to give us an indication if those kind of things would sound familiar to you. Because these are actually some things that we've encountered in our previous work a lot, actually. And I stole this graphic down there from somewhere on Twitter, but it happened to me multiple times, and both of us multiple times within our engagements when we got called into incident response, and we were asking, okay, this, okay, we understand what happened, but how's the shape of our infrastructure? How good is our infrastructure? What's the security health of our infrastructure? What's the basic hygiene look like? And we fell over the most obvious question, like how many assets do you have? And depending on who you ask, you get a pretty broad scale from 4,800 to 9,000 something. So if you consider it, there's a lot of gap in between. And this is actually what we find a lot. So know your assets, not so much in the most companies. And this has been really bugging us. And the second point, we also have seen it so many times, and I'm sure you've seen it as well. There's an infection spreading just everywhere in the network, and the hardest part is telling friend from foe, really. And this is really when you don't know what your admins are doing and if this is legitimate behavior, this really kills you when time is of the essence in terms of an incident response. And even worse is the next point. Unfortunately, this is so bad that I couldn't find a proper meme to go with it. But I've had this so many times when we were at clients on site that the question we had to phrase after looking at some of their previous vulnerability scanning results was not so much the question that we tried to answer, like how the attacker got in or how the attacker spread, all of a sudden didn't be more relevant anymore because it was just so vulnerable and there was so much stuff going on the inside within the perimeter that it was just a matter of like how easy it was for the attacker to spread, not if he could have spread or she could have spread around. And last but not least, for most companies we've been working in an incident response capacity, there was pretty much admin credentials for everybody. They were handing out admin credentials, admin accounts, like T-shirts at a baseball game. It was incredible. Just like you want an admin account, you want an admin account, and this just kills you in case of an incident, because if you have 1,000 admin accounts, local admin accounts on machines that are just laying around there for the attacker to pick up, this just kills you in an incident. And as a consequence of that, and like after our incidents, we tend to do our internal debriefs, and the funniest things always happen when it becomes public, or even if we talk to management or some of the people in charge at the companies that we work with, we get three very significant statements that just are bugging us. And the first one is like my favorite, and I've read it now in the last couple of weeks a lot in the media again when there were like bigger security incidents all over Europe, and like the CEO goes on camera and says like, but we've done everything we could. We are ISO certified and we're so compliant. Still, we got hacked. This is the first thing. And Robert and I are always sending back and forth the articles of newspapers where this was in there. And we're just laughing because it's like, yeah, you did, right? But more on that later. The second thing, we usually, when we come in, the first thing that people, especially management, tells us is like, yeah, but we've spent so much money on that latest shiny tool. Why is that not protecting us? We have antivirus. We've bought this new firewall. And again, this is also a very common mistake we see. And the third one is, and we've had this happening to us also in a previous engagement when we were having this discussion with a lot of folks at the company, and we were having this big crisis meeting. And at some point, some guy from the CISO office gets up and says like, yeah, we knew all those risks, but everybody accepted them. And this has also been a huge problem for companies that we've seen. And this is actually where last year at the RSA conference in San Francisco, Robert and I got to talk and like, hey, maybe we should do a talk about this and like what is it with those things and why keep they still happening from us? And this message is that we're trying to bring across in this talk is really a very basic one, and we have to focus on the fundamentals first. And this is actually the thing I want to raise next and go into more detail. What we still see, and this we see quite a lot, and coming from an audit firm, we can really tell you stories about this, but compliance is related to security, but compliance is not security, and security is not compliance. Those two are in relation to each other, but they're not the same thing. And we've had it so many times, and a policy does not fix a technical issue. And this is a very important thing to state out loud, because there's so many people writing awesome policies and what should and shouldn't be done. But on the one, like, if nobody ever reads the policy, or if it's not enforced, this is just like walking on over a crosswalk with the red light. Then this is, yeah, it just happens that people cross the policy then. But it's fine documented, and it looks really good on paper. The next thing, there's usually two types of companies when we get called in. Either the ones on the left-hand side, which are more than the other ones, but the other ones are more significant on the right-hand side. On the left-hand side, we have those companies that try to just solve every problem with a tool. And just every problem they have, they buy a new tool, they put it in their data center, they plug in cables, and be done with it. This has been happening so often that there's actually this joke that people sometimes make about sim projects that just were bought to produce hot air and to blink. They have their lights like blink. And the other thing is, and I really enjoy reading those little Bobby comics, I recommend you to check them out, is if you don't spend money on security, we will guarantee you that you will not see any attacks because you cannot see them, which is terrible in itself, but this is how security is still done. And a lot of companies, and there are some that get better at this, but still, budget cuts, especially in a recession, still also affect security, when you should actually spend more money on security. And this is still a huge problem. And the next thing, I really want to say this out loud. This is really important for me personally, because a lot of people not realize this. Accepted security risk, it's fine. A company has a certain risk appetite, and it's okay. But, and this is really important, if you take home just one thing from this presentation, I would recommend this is this. Know that your accepted security risks are still risks. They can still be exploited by attackers, and you still have one hell of an attack surface. And you have to be aware of this, because there's so many companies where everybody accepts a risk here, a risk there, and so forth and so on. And this culminates to quite a big mountain of risks, and those can still be exploited. And attackers will not care if you accepted them. And this has been a really, really painful process for a lot of companies to learn, and this is why we've put it on a slide. So where do we go from here? Our house is on fire. What do we do? And after an incident, of course, what you do during an incident, it's clear you have your incident response processes, and you have external support, and KPMG or competitors are happy to help you through your burning house. But what do we do afterwards? And we suggest a simple approach. Let's focus on the basics first, and then worry about all the other stuff. And there's really three key things that we want you to get right. And if you do that, you still can get hacked, but you will make it a hell of a lot harder for attackers. Apply critical patches. All of these patches, all of these problems are known problems. This is nothing new, we're telling you, but we just have to get it done this time. The same with network segmentation. WannaCry, NotPetya, all of these malware outbreaks, all of these ransomware outbreaks really showed us how many companies are still having trouble with this. And there's so many that are still having trouble with this. We have to get this done for good. We have to put it into the state-of-the-art network and fix your privileged accounts. Last but not least, you have to restrict who owns elevated privilege in your company. And Robert will go into that a lot more into detail now, but these are three things that if you have no other things that you can do, you really should focus on those. But now, Robert.
So we are on Slido. If you have any questions, feel free to put them on Slido, and we are happy to answer your questions. So having heard now the things that Daniel told us, let's have a look what the basics are and how we can tackle them in order to get things right. And the first essential part, as Daniel mentioned, was apply the critical patches. So this time, definitely for real, get your boots on the ground. It's enough already being said, so we should get our hands dirty and apply those things. So applying those patches throughout the whole infrastructure, we know it's a tough type of thing because everyone complains and tells us that it might be difficult to leverage those things in order to increase the security. But the patches you're applying definitely throughout the landscape protect your business, they protect your customers, of course they obviously protect your data, and finally they protect your job. Because it's your job to do the things, it's your job to assist the executives and to act with due care in order to safeguard the whole environment you're operating in. Some of the excuses we hear quite often are, we cannot patch everything, it is too complicated, things might get too difficult, so we better don't do anything. Right, enough with all these excuses and so on. So it's definitely time now to start off with the things that you can patch. The Pareto principle, which is something doing 80% or covering 80% by 20% of the effort, is an oldie but a goldie. It still works. It's still something that you can leverage. You decrease the risk and you decrease the overall vulnerabilities of your whole enterprise footprint. Definitely, one of the essentials is here to prioritize right. Therefore, start off with the assets that are of your importance, the assets that have the most contribution to your business processes, to your enterprise, and the vulnerabilities which are critically at risk, meaning everything which has a score higher than 7 in the CVE rating. That's definitely something you can use to prioritize your things. We know manually you cannot cover all these things, so therefore automate as much as possible. Tools, vendors like Microsoft have the SCCM, or in the Linux and Unix environment, there is Puppet or Ansible available that you can use. And please do us a very big favor, don't forget the network infrastructure, and because of the whole digitization and the spread of new devices being involved like IoT, also include them and apply the patches there as well. Last but not least, one learning for us in our cases was don't trust the IT guys if you ask them, did you patch everything? Because the answer will always be yes. Make a vulnerability scanner be your best friend to check effectiveness, because one case we had, there was WannaCry, the company we were supporting with was actually saying we applied the latest patches, but they didn't actually restart the system in order to make the patches become effective. This is definitely something you can check with vulnerability scanners. Daniel.
So here's an odd thing, but this is a CISO's tale, and we've seen this a lot of times happening within multiple companies. But Robert is the mountaineer of us, but I will tell you something about mountains as for Austrian presentations. Don't mind the numbers on there, they're just for exemplary purpose. But on every start of every vulnerability management program, when a company hasn't been doing this right, and this should be a message of encouragement for you, you started off somewhere. Didn't you round about what they had, and didn't you round about what their vulnerabilities were, right? And then they started off like, hey, let's do vulnerability management. Let's get everything patched, right? And at some point, they're looking at the numbers and like, this is really bad. What are we going to do? There's so many vulnerabilities. And they have spent quite a lot of money on this new fancy tool, and they go further with it. And then there's the point where the CISO actually, or most of the security team is like, oh, I should probably look for a new job because this is bad. And here's the message of encouragement. Once there's a peak, and you have to get there. This is a painful process. You don't know really where this peak is, because it might be the case if you're in a bigger company, and we've seen this happening. You find a couple hundred, you find a couple thousand servers somewhere, and all of a sudden your vulnerability score increases, or the number of vulnerability increases by 10 times. And this is just what happens. You got to accept that this is the technical debt your company has raised. But once you get to this top, you can actually be glad because it won't get any more worse than that. And this is where you can tell a good CISO apart from not as good CISO, because this is where a person actually goes in and gets their hand dirty and says like, okay, now we know how bad it is. Now we have to do something about it, right? And this process will be hard. I'm not want to make you any illusions about that. You will have a very slow start, and this will be really tedious process at the beginning. But once you start working on it, and once you get also the IT folks convinced that there is a way of going downwards on that mountain, they will start working with you. They will be reluctant at first, maybe, but you will get them there, and they will actually realize that this is not as hard as they thought. And this is a critical point. As soon as you get to the point and you get the IT folks to realize and the business folks to realize, okay, this is not as bad as we thought it is, you actually get down that mountain faster and faster. All of a sudden, you're in the point where you can start thinking about accepting risks again, right? This is the point, somewhere in this area is the point where you actually have a decent risk state. And you can actually think about, okay, these might be the last 10, 15% of my assets. That might be somewhere one or two that I could accept, but definitely not before that, not as long as you're somewhere up on that mountain. The attack surface is just too big. And just really prepare for one hell of a mountaineering tour. And Robert, I'm sure, will tell you in another session, or if we were in Singapore, a lot about mountaineering. I cannot about mountaineering, though. But Robert, please.
Yeah, so if you have any questions about the mountaineering of a CISO, feel free to reach out in Slido, and we're happy to answer your questions. But moving forward, what are the next issues that we need to tackle in terms of patches and the like? One of the most difficult parts that we are seeing is the technology lifecycle management, because it's one of the biggest unsolved challenges and complex things in enterprises because of the size and the complexity of the enterprise. It can cause actually a lot of headache to you if you don't tackle these things right, and if you don't do these things in order to protect your environment. We know that the time the enterprise moves along and the enterprise develops, some things will remain, and you don't better want to touch them because they're unstable and they provide valuable contribution to the business. But are you sure that you want to pay the interest rate of the technical debt you are amassing over time? So that is a question that you need to ask yourself. However, we strongly advise you, and this is also what our experience has shown us, it is better to pay up now and tackle the things at the very early stage and look after decommissioning and phasing out the old technologies, reducing the attack surface and reducing the likelihood of attackers being successful. So in addition, if you have this lifecycle management, if you are aware of what you have in your enterprise, you also have a certain visibility, and you are improving the visibility in your enterprise to see what assets you have and to see what is going on in your network and amongst your systems. So therefore, technology lifecycle management is definitely an essential part. So our strong advice is get rid of the old stuff, move it out of the enterprise, and prepare some technology lifecycle management plans. Another thing that comes to our attention over the past few months is definitely the network segmentation part. Now, this time for good. I think even religion has told us now that the earth is not flat any longer, and so shouldn't be your network. So you should definitely make sure that your network is not any longer a flat type of network. That is something that we have learned probably in the past, but it's something definitely which is not anymore valid for present and for the future. Therefore, in recent cases, microsegmentation would have saved enterprises in case of ransomware outbreaks. If you have encapsulated those, if you have protected the crown jewels, yeah, we are not going to give you another talk about the crown jewel type of thing because you have already heard about this quite often. But the network segmentation is definitely something that is for your business and for protecting your intellectual property, your customer data, or your sales data. Something that is definitely here a key part is when segmenting the network or splitting the network apart to have some separated things and to have some so-called tier 0 environment, which is for your privileged accounts, workstations, and admin users. It is definitely something of your safe haven if you have an attack, if you have an outbreak where you can move backwards and start off there to deploy some new trusted environment. Moving along the journey and talking about privileged things also comes into our mind the handling of the privileged accounts. Over the time, we have seen that privileged accounts are spread amongst the whole enterprise. For instance, that some type of service accounts running with domain or admin privileges. This is something definitely attackers are looking after. So therefore, it is an essential part to separate the privileged IDs from the user IDs. Yeah, we are not going to do another tool talk, but definitely it can help with tools to circumvent these issues. And if you have some budget constraints, some self-developed wrappers and other things can help you in order to tackle this issue. As we are now in the year 2020, definitely we cannot avoid multi-factor authentication any longer for privileged accounts. It is a so-called must that we need to establish. Definitely we can, it's a good argument also to get rid of text messages as a second factor if you introduce multi-factor authentication, but as long as you have a second factor, it definitely protects you. And finally, when it comes towards protection of those privileged accounts, it also makes sense to enable those privileged users with an own workstation or a virtualized workstation to have some just-in-time privileges in order to avoid lateral movement and to detect this lateral movement amongst the enterprise. So our house is on fire, what we have heard at the beginning, but what do we do from now? The things we have mentioned and explained you before, try them at home and get the freaking basics right. We definitely didn't tell you some new things because these are things we already heard in the past, but still enterprises don't apply the basic cyber principles and basic cyber hygiene. So applying the patches, fix this network segmentation, and clean up your privileged accounts in reality in order to make sure you have a safe and sound environment. These things, as said, are not new. We never did traditional security in the past, right? So we know all of the things, we know all the things that we have to do. So let's do them now, and let's protect our enterprise for a safe business in the future. Thank you very much for your attention. If you have any questions, just drop us again a note in Slido, and we are happy to answer them. Daniel and I would like to thank you for your attention. And with this takeaway and with these highlights, we hope that you have the ability to strengthen the security of your enterprise. Thank you very much and have a nice day.
Thank you.